how do you respond to those that say, look, adding more guns into a school situation, if we address the Free Arms Act first, is simply treating symptom, not cause?
Well, first of all, let's recognize that that sign out front of the school that says gun-free zone is not a deterrent to any would-be criminal. So, and then the second thing is the statistics bear this out. 98% of mass public shootings happen in a gun-free zone because criminals prefer unarmed victims. Now, 12 states, at least 12 states, I'm pouring through the numbers, allow some form of concealed carry by teachers or faculty in their schools. And all of the problems that people are worried about are not occurring. Students aren't taking the teachers' guns. Teachers aren't being shot when police show up and that sort of thing. It actually works out.
The president says, though, we should strengthen the background check system. And when we talk about guns being in the wrong hands of the wrong people, you say background checks give a false sense of security. Why do you disagree with the president?
Well, we've got a problem with the background check system right now. Over 99% of the rejections are false positives. In fact, only about 1 in 1,000 people who fail the background check are pursued for criminal charges, when ostensibly they should all be pursued. The reason they're not pursued is most of them are innocent, law-abiding Americans who've been denied their ability to purchase a firearm on that day because of the background check system. The other problem we have, and the problem with the legislation that's been proposed here in Congress, I'm not sure if this is the particular bill the president is pushing, but a bill called Fix NICS, it would encourage the administration to turn names over. And the problem with that is those haven't been adjudicated by a court. I'm okay if somebody's lost their right to own a gun by a military court or a federal court or a state court. But when you start asking, you know, the VA or the Social Security Administration to make that decision, that's a problem.
Congressman, do you believe when you look at some of the victims, the survivors of the latest Florida shooting and how eloquent they are, that actually sentiment is shifting? Surveys seem to suggest that actually now public do support greater action, greater control as far as guns are concerned in the United States. Do you agree that actually voters need to be listened to on this and actually sentiment is shifted, particularly when you've got companies now pulling support, pulling advantages from the NRA?
Well, survivors, we do need to listen to the survivors. I talked to 2 Columbine survivors who are now 40 years old this week, and one of them told me he thinks that teachers should be armed. He said at the time he was frustrated at the adults, the legislators, the police, the faculty that allowed that to happen and didn't respond. But he's come to forgive them. But what's unforgivable is how unserious some of these proposals are. I mean, there's not a single school shooting in this century that would have been stopped by a background check.
There's a lot of absence of data on gun violence. From what I understand, Congress has never funded any such request. And as we know, we're a data-driven world where more information would help with better decision-making. Would you support funding for information-gathering purposes to figure out a solution, a better solution here?
Oh, I think we should get all the data. In fact, I've got inquiries into the ATF about, I want to know, is the background check disproportionately discriminating against minorities? And the ATF won't respond. So we've got a problem. Congress wants to know these answers. We're just having a hard time getting them from the executive branch agencies.
When we look at what the president has said in light of the Florida shootings, Congressman, he's talked about renewing a call for a bump stock ban. In fact, he was quoted today as saying that he'd pull it irrespective of what Congress wants at this stage. When he's talking about greater depth of background checks, do you think he's being too emotional in his response to the latest shootings?
Do I think he's being what?
Too emotional, too emotive.
No, I think the president should be sympathetic or emotional. I'm emotional. I'm frustrated that my colleagues are offering unserious solutions that they know won't work. Now, the bump stock ban that you mentioned, the president doesn't have the authority to ban a firearm accessory unless it meets the legal definition of something Congress has already put forward. And the Obama administration has already ruled, the ATF ruled that the bump stock doesn't meet that legal definition. If you want to ban bump stocks, and by the way, they're plastic gimmicks. Most serious gun owners wouldn't have one if you gave it to them. But if you want to ban them, you have to come to Congress and change the laws. You can't do that at the executive branch.
What's feasible in terms of law changes here, Congressman? What do you think is actually feasible in light of Florida?
I think you could make sure that the courts do turn over those names, not the administrative branch, but the courts. They should do that. They failed to do that in the shooting in Texas, where the church was shot up. But I think what's feasible is honestly to have a real discussion about how we respond to the shootings. People are talking about things that may or may not reduce the likelihood of a shooting, but nobody's talked about how to stop these shootings. What would stop them are armed teachers. So we need to give states more flexibility to implement that. Passing my Safe Students Act, which is H.R. 34, that would repeal the Federal Gun-Free School Zone Act, that would be a step in the right direction.
Congressman, can I just ask if you would be willing to see the legal drinking age drop to 18? Because surely if you can handle a gun at 18, you can also handle alcohol.
Actually, yeah, I'm working on a bill to do that, because I think if you're going to be called and drafted by your country to die for your country, you should absolutely have that right to purchase alcohol. If the states want to change that, okay, that's another thing, but there shouldn't be a federal 21 age. But the other important thing here is, tomorrow I'm going to introduce a bill to lower the age to buy a handgun from 21 to 18. Because if they're successful in passing a bill that bans the purchase of a long gun until you're 21, then you've completely extinguished everybody's right from the ages of 18 to 20.
Right, as you said in your tweet.
Right, and the Constitution prevents that. The Heller decision, the landmark case, the Supreme Court allowed for states to have some restrictions, and the government, and the McDonald case as well. But what they said is you can't absolutely deprive somebody of their right to keep and bear arms. And if you raise the age to 21 for all people, you have done that.